Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Aquí tienen las instrucciones para el día de hoy, miércoles el 22 de septiembre o jueves el 23 de septiembre. You didn't have any homework due for today. We took our quiz last class. Due at the end of last class were the worksheets, the conjugation, present tense conjugation worksheet, also the key terms and concepts worksheet. Those were due by the end of last class. We worked on those in class last week. But nothing was due for today. Your warm-up is on page 24, exercise 7. And what you're doing for today's warm-up is you are indicating which of the phrases from the word bank in today's agenda. Here's your bank of phrases that you can use for the warm-up. Which of these phrases would you use to finish off each sentence? So for example, para sacar una buena nota, to get a good grade, hay que estudiar mucho. One must study a lot. So complete each of these sentences by choosing one of these phrases from the word bank to indicate how to achieve that goal that's stated at the beginning of the sentence. Para aprender de memoria el vocabulario, to learn vocabulary by memory. What must you do? Estudiar con amigos, dibujar, sacar buenas notas, to get good grades, repetir las palabras nuevas, repeat new words, estudiar vocabulario nuevo, or hacer una pregunta al profesor, ask a question of the professor. Which one of these would you use to finish off number 1? Para entender mejor la tarea, to understand the homework better. Para leer mejor en español, to read better in Spanish. Para hacer un proyecto de arte, to do an art project. Para ir a la universidad, to go to university. Para un examen, in preparation for an exam. Finish off each of these sentences by choosing one of the phrases from the word bank and then begin by saying hay que estudiar con amigos, hay que estudiar vocabulario nuevo, hay que, and then one of the phrases from the agenda. Hay que means one must or one needs to. So that's your warm-up for today. Thereafter, we are going to do a whiteboard activity in pairs. Exercise 11, page 26. So for this exercise, you are going to indicate, we're going to go over 5 classes together. Inglés, arte, educación física, historia, and coro or música. For each one of those classes, what's one thing that you need to do and one thing that is prohibited in that class? So for example, para la clase de matemáticas hay que usar una calculadora y se prohíbe hablar con amigos. Para la clase de educación física hay que practicar deportes, se prohíbe comer en la clase. Para la clase de arte hay que dibujar, se prohíbe escuchar música. Para la clase de historia hay que tomar notas, hay que escribir notas, se prohíbe hablar con amigos. Right, so pick 5 classes. For each of those classes, indicate one thing you need to do, and then one thing you're not allowed to do in that class. All right, we're going to review the notes from page 9 that we started off a few weeks ago with present tense verb conjugations. Just kind of taking a step back in terms of what we've been working on for the past couple classes. We did conjugation bingo. We did a PowerPoint that walked you through these notes. We did workbook practice pages, guided and core workbook pages, and then most recently your quiz was on conjugating verbs, the three parts to a verb, the infinitive, the stem, which is the very beginning of the infinitive, and then the ending are the last two letters. And the process of conjugating is removing the ending, AR, ER, IR, from the infinitive. You're left with the stem when you do that. And then you're adding to the stem your present tense endings for AR verbs, ER verbs, and IR verbs. So we're kind of continuing that same process, right? Except we're now looking at what are called stem changing verbs. Stem changing verbs function the same way as regular verbs. The only difference is that they have a spelling change in their stem. That's why we call them stem changers. For example, poder, the O changes to UE. Empezar, the E, second E, changes to IE. And as you can see, for all stem changing verbs, like the verb pedir, the E changes to an I. That takes place in all forms except for the nosotros form. That's all articulated here. And this is where we're going to take notes for today's class. The video here will walk you through and provide some practice activities. We're going to do exercise 4 together in class, where you guys need to complete the phrases with the correct form of the appropriate verb. So there's two things you're doing for each of these spaces. You're picking the verb that you think makes sense, and you may need to look up some of the verbs that you're not familiar with, and then you're conjugating that verb according to the subject that's provided. So for example, it's incredible, but my favorite class starts is the verb empezar, or my favorite class understands. Entender is the verb to understand. Empezar would be the correct verb. Again, means to begin or start, and then the way we would conjugate it would be the él, ella, usted form, because we're talking about something. In this case, mi clase favorita, my favorite class. It's the third person singular, and you can see how you would conjugate it there. And remember to change the stem in all forms, but not the nosotros form. The stem would stay intact. After we do the practice activity, we're going to start your homework in class. Homework is pages 27 and 28, página 27, 28 on the guided side. Make sure you're doing the correct side, the guided workbook. The great thing about the guided side is it gives you all the notes that are provided in the textbook, so you don't have to constantly be flipping back and forth. For part A, you're indicating the letter that needs to change in the stem and the letter or letters that it changes to. So empezar, for example, the E changes to IE. That's it articulated here in the notes and also on page 27, the notes that you took earlier. For poder, the O changes to UE. So you're just going to draw an arrow from the letter in the stem to the change that it makes when you conjugate it. That's part A. Part B, you're going to fill in the missing letters of the stem change letters according to the form that it should be conjugated in. Again, you want to refer to the information up here and in your notes from page 27. Los chicos juegan. For jugar, the U changes to UE. Juegan. So J-U-E-G-A-N. El camarero sirve. S-I-R-V-E. You're filling in the missing letters indicating what the stem change is, the spelling change. For part C, remember that the nosotros and vosotros forms do not change their stem. So for these, you're going to identify the verb that's being used. In this case, this would be the verb jugar, the verb to play. You're going to conjugate that verb in the nosotros form, not changing the stem. Again, because in the nosotros form, it's the only form where the stem remains intact. No change at all. So for number 1 in part C, for example, tú juegas al fútbol, nosotros no jugamos. 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 Still want to use the nosotros ending, right? Jorge entiende la clase. This is the verb entender. Nosotros no entendemos. Entendemos la clase. All right, so that's part C. And then part D says, answer the following questions choosing the stem-changing verb that makes the most sense in the sentence. So it's similar to what we did for exercise 14, right? Pick the verb that makes the most sense and then conjugate it according to the context, according to the subject. Apologize for the long video. I'll just trying to walk you through each of these. Son las 10 de la noche. It's 10 o'clock at night. Nosotras estamos cansadas. We are tired. ¿Qué hacemos? What are we going to do? Nosotras, well, for sure the verb dormir makes sense here, right? Querer is the verb to want. Could also be the verb to love, but wouldn't work here if we're talking about being hella tired at 10 o'clock. Conjugate the verb dormir in the nosotras form. Remember, there's no stem change at all in the nosotros form. So it would be dormimos. Poder and dormir are the same in that the O changes to UE. Dormir an IR verb though, so instead of hemos, like for poder, which is an ER verb, we're going to use an IR ending, like pedir. That's how we get dormimos. D-O-R-M-I-M-O-S. Dormimos. Juan y Felipe son camareros en un restaurante. Juan and Felipe are waiters at a restaurant. ¿Qué hacen todos los días? What do they do every day? Well, they serve, right? If they're waiters. Repetir is to repeat. They serve food. That makes sense. Servir has a stem change. The E changes to an I. And then since we're talking about two people, that's our ending, the ellos form. Talking about a group of people, take off the IR and put N. And that's how we get the correct answer for number 2, sirven. Sirven. S-I-R-V-E-N. And that is your homework, muchachos, for our next class. Sorry for such a long video there, but wanted to walk you through everything we did today. Got a pretty heavy agenda today. All right, nos vemos en la clase. Adiós.